Okay, well, welcome to the Silicon Valley Health Institute. We've been in business, we're a nonprofit, we've been in business about 20 years. We aim to bring you top-notch health experts to give you information so you can be proactive on your health and take steps toward optimal wellness. Feel free to donate or become a member, or, send us a request to be on an email list so you don't miss anything. This other gentleman in a blue shirt, it's Stephen Fowkes, who's a genius. My name is Susan Downs. So welcome. Today we have Anthony Haynes, who is a genius. He knows so much that probably have to listen to it several times. He's also been nice enough to answer specific questions. But anyway, he's been in private practice over 25 years and is one of the most experienced registered nutritional therapists in the UK. He was one of the first practitioners to implement the principles of functional medicine in the UK since 1994. He's been teaching for 25 years, including at a variety of nutritional colleges, ION, CNELM, BCNH, CNM, and at the IFM in the USA. Also for Nutri-Link, which is a company he co-founded with Michael Ash in 1998. He's presented lectures, seminars, and courses on a wide variety of subjects over those years. In particular, he's been studying the connection between viruses and bacteria. He's been studying the pathogenesis of autoimmune conditions, and he's known as a practitioner's practitioner. He's my practitioner. He employs his clinical experience in managing nutritional needs of his patients, which number in excess of 15,000 at his clinic. He's also a successful, award-winning author of 2 books on nutrition. Welcome, Anthony, my favorite practitioner.
How do I follow that? But anyway, it's, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be with you all. And I was going to see Palmer's there. I just want to say, love it, Palmer. Just want to confirm that. If I didn't think it was a very good book, I wouldn't talk about it. But I'm deliberate that I think it's a very, very, very good book. So I want to congratulate you on that, and also your life experience with it too. And I do agree with what Dr. Mark Hyman said in the foreword, that really it's one of the only books out there that actually addresses the whole list of things to do with autoimmunity. And I think it's more real in that sense, because it talks about stress and hormones and not just the obvious things that I'll perhaps digging in a few layers to today. So a pleasure to have you there as well, Palmer. Appreciate that. Thank you for the intro. Stephen, again, great for you to have here. It's great to get the word out. And again, hello to everyone, wherever you might be in the world. I'm going to be talking about the connections and the underlying causes of autoimmunity as I've found it. And it's interesting, I can sort of compartmentalize my experience in my career. And these, by the way, these are my blue light blocking glasses. So I'm just going to call... Actually, I'm going to put that off there. And I've discovered that after 30 seconds of wearing these glasses in front of my screen, I feel different in a good way. So I've actually noticed I've got a pair of amber shades, and after 9 o'clock, I put my amber shades on, and it helps my brain to wind down towards bedtime. But the blue light blocking during the day, which are just ordinary see-through glasses, non-prescription, really do help me to feel different in my brain. And I'd really encourage anyone. I mean, unfortunately, I spend a lot of time in front of my computer, but I just recommend blue light blocking glasses to us all as an aside. So autoimmunity, where does it start? So I started practicing in 1992, but a long time before that, my older brother, when I was about 12 and he was about 14, he developed a condition called Crohn's. And it's interesting to note the sort of the history of Crohn, what leads to Crohn. So he developed an autoimmune inflammatory bowel disease, and so that was my exposure to sort of autoimmunity. And I realized as I became a nutritionist, I always wanted to help my older brother, because it took many, many years for him to ever listen to me, as is the typical case with family, especially when they're older. And he went to Cambridge, and he was a scholar. So of course he knew everything. What did his younger brother know? So it took many years to gain influence. So in fact, I had a handful of clients with Crohn's who did remarkably well, basically managing their condition, I could say, without any signs or symptoms. For me to have the courage and the strength to say, look, Richard, my older brother, I said, look, he doesn't have these symptoms anymore. He's resolved. In fact, I had one client who took a certain probiotic, the most studied probiotic in the world, and he ended up resolving his condition just by taking a probiotic. So again, some people need to do a lot. Some people knew little, but only then did he get to listen to me. So it took basically over 10 years of me being a practitioner for my older brother to listen to me. We know what it's like with family, but that was obviously the autoimmune condition. And what was really interesting is I'd really only got my eyes opened when I listened to a fantastic professor, Alan Ebringer, who's from King's College in London, who had been working for, I think, 35 years in biomedical science, looking at molecular testing. And it was only through him, and I actually went to Seattle to listen. This is an IFM conference, and listen to him speak. He actually worked about a mile from me where I worked in Harley Street, and he had to fly halfway across the world to get to listen to him. And he's a man who basically presents scientific information in a very lovely way that professors do. It was, here's the information, and during the conversation, he revealed that he presented this information for the last, couple of decades to rheumatologists, because he was talking specifically about rheumatoid arthritis in that particular lecture, and not one single consultant had changed their practice to accommodate the information that he and his colleagues, that's Rashid and Wilson and Ebringer at King's College, had discovered about RA, and not one single consultant had changed anything about their practice in spite of learning this revelationary work showing that the underlying cause of RA could in fact be a hidden bacterial infection. And his lab were then offering the ability to test for these bugs in a specific way. It seemed that testing, of course, that's quite topical, isn't it? Whether testing may or may not be accurate. There was a Dutch group that doubted his findings. So we can't find this particular Proteus mirabilis antibodies being associated with RA at all. We don't think this is true. So Ebringer's lab, he said, I'll tell you what, for free, we'll test 100 samples, give us 100 controls, and 50 controls and 50 RA patients, blind it for us, so we don't know what's what, give us numbers, and they revealed it, and basically they identified those patients, the Dutch patients with RA, based on the antibodies to Proteus. And they got it bang on correct when they sent it back, and the Dutch team broke the code. And they said, wow, it's amazing. So clearly your testing for Proteus is very different to that which we're doing. And yes, it was. So otherwise they were dismissing it. And so you can see in the papers that whilst you can have one study group that says, we found this in this group, but other researchers might get funded, and then they look for this, and they do a certain test for certain presence of a certain toxin or a certain bacteria or a certain virus, and they say, no, we didn't find the same thing at all, so we're really calling into question that previous work. And really you want consensus before you can reach some sort of identification of an offensive item or a protocol. So it was really interesting to listen to the dear Alan Ebring, who's a retired professor now, Professor Emeritus at King's College. Really his lab were able to demonstrate the sophistication of their testing process, and that the vast majority of individuals with rheumatoid arthritis had and have ongoing a hidden bacterial infection, Proteus mirabilis. Now, there may be also Prevotella, a bacteria involved, and it's not the only bacteria involved, but there's a significant percentage. And again, the methodology of testing was looking at the antibodies to Proteus, and that they could then determine whether the individual would have RA. And the reason for this is that the antigen, the presenting part of the bacteria to the immune system, so it's called the presenting antigen, was very, very similar in its molecular structure. And we're talking about different molecules here. We're talking about 6 or 7 different molecules that looked very similar to a type of collagen in the body. So the immune system would develop a reaction or an antibody to the antigen of Proteus, which, let me just, for example, presents itself like this to the immune system. And so make an antibody. Oh gosh, that's a bacteria. We recognize you from our evolutionary perspective. That's a bad guy. Let's make antibodies to it to address that. And it may actually be asymptomatic within the individual, whereas E. coli urinary tract infections, you can get the stinging and you get discomfort. And whilst D-mannose is a fantastic remedy for that, they may recommend antibiotics. It seems that there's a hidden behind the scenes bacteria involved in urinary tract infections, Proteus, which is coming from the large intestine. And so what they discovered is that after a time of that being present and making antigens to that, the immune system got confused and thought that looked pretty similar. And so it started to make antibodies to this. And guess what this is? This is a type of collagen. It's a type of collagen that you end up in your hands, and you end up with deformed hands and possibly feet, and then other tissues as well become affected by that antibody challenge. And so if protease is hidden in the background, then the immune system continues attacking it. And so guess what? Maybe Humira and some biological drugs that suppress the immune system, methotrexate, might be effective at reducing that antibody production to these antigens, which look very similar. And lo and behold, yes, those drugs work. That's the protocol. So my first client, lo and behold, when I got back from my trip to Seattle, was a man, not a woman, because women are much more likely to have RA. And it's probably because it's not just the sex difference in the immune systems. We know that women are more likely to have most conditions to men, it's true, but certainly autoimmunity. And it varies from condition to condition as to who has what and more. The only condition that men have more on an autoimmune level, as far as I know, is type 1 diabetes, and maybe possibly juvenile onset diabetes and juvenile onset arthritis, possibly. But women are more likely to have RA at 7 or 8 to 1 for rheumatoid arthritis, and there are many other autoimmune conditions, but it's quite high relative to other ratios of other autoimmune conditions. Well, why is that? Why is RA specifically different? And it's believed to be the shape and structure of the urinary tract in women compared to men. And women are more likely to have that hidden bacterial infection. Or maybe there's a translocation from the large intestine to the urinary tract, but it's got to do with the anatomical differences as opposed to sex hormones, or the difference in the immune system between men and women. My first client came through the door. Guess what? It was a man with rheumatoid arthritis. And I'm not sure if I shared this with you before, but effectively I had the papers that eBring had printed. I got the papers and I had a photocopier, and this is, I think it was 2009. And I photocopied the papers and I explained to him that protease is likely to be a factor. He didn't want to take methotrexate. He did not want to take high dose of prednisolone. And so he was up for at least a trial of doing something different. And he'd been to see an absolute expert on RA, who is a brilliant diagnostician in terms of the hand feel. And he'd been literally diagnosing RA for 30 years. And it was indeed a very adept individual for the diagnostics. And so he put the medications to one side. He didn't even start them. And he said, well, I'll follow your recommendations. And so I recommended, and I did some muscle testing with him, and we identified that protease was there with muscle testing. Well, maybe it was just something that I was projecting onto him. I was aware of that. Gave him the papers, and he embarked on a trial of taking a very strong antimicrobial. It was actually ADP oregano from Biotics Research. It's a very, very good sustained release emulsified format of oregano, so quite different to the usual oregano soft gels. And I also recommended him some gut lining support and some detoxification support for die-off, effectively. Anyway, to cut a story short, within 9 months he had no RA whatsoever, and he'd been improving all the while. He went to see his consultant, and the consultant didn't recognize his face, and sort of he sort of grabs the hands of his clients about it. So grabs the hands and sort of and does the hand assessment and says, "You don't have RA." And he said, "God, that's a relief. I was told by the consultant who diagnosed me that I was going to have this for life." And he said, "Well, that guy didn't know what he was doing." And he said, "Professor, it was you." And he said, blah, 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 and he literally ushered my client, who had actually been a director of a medium-sized company and was an engineering degree holder and a member of the Institute of Directors. So he was a very educated man, well-to-do, knew what he wanted to do, and he ushered him out of the room without further ado. No conversation, just literally ushered him out of the room physically. He couldn't bear the fact that actually someone had gotten better, as opposed to simply managing their condition over time, and the fact that he was the man that diagnosed him and said that he would have RA for the rest of his life, and he didn't. So then my client persisted, and he got another appointment with him in some time hence, because he really wanted to show the consultant that actually there's more than one way to address RA, and he managed to get another meeting. But the meeting lasted about 2 minutes, and then he was sent a letter by the consultant saying that spontaneous remissions have been known to occur. Well, my client was keen to show him the papers from Alan Ebringer, who may indeed have lectured this consultant at some stage, but he hadn't listened to him, and that there was another way forward. And so he had taken this oregano extract, amongst other things, to support his health, but particularly to clear the protease infection, which was probably likely to have been there, although it is possible there may have been another infection of another kind, but nonetheless, a hidden infection was dealt with, because effectively the main thrust of the treatment was a strong antimicrobial approach. And since that time, I have spread this news about the proteus and about how oregano oil, especially the sustained release in emulsified form, and it is different to simple oregano oil, either in oil or in soft gels, which doesn't reach the parts that other beers can't reach, which is a reference to the Heineken adverts. For those of you who don't live in England, I'm sorry about that. And I've actually had practitioner friends of mine's parents who've had RA. They've actually then embarked on a protocol. And I'm not a big fan of protocols. I'm a fan of principles, not protocols. And they have become clear of RA. Now it doesn't change tissue that's already been disfigured. It doesn't change that, but it does actually change the ongoing. So it doesn't transform the body back to the youthful state, but it can help. So really, I learned about autoimmunity many years after being a practitioner and having seen thousands of patients already, and actually really having a big question mark over my head, to be honest, about autoimmunity and not really getting it. And it was the meeting with and the lectures with Alan Liebringer, and then reading his papers, and then looking up the researchers of Rashid and Wilson and looking at all their work, and then getting the book. Well, actually, this is one of his books. I just couldn't find the other one, but Alan Liebringer's book. So the cost of £80 or £100 for this very thin book, as you do. And he's linked with multiple sclerosis, mad cow's disease, and this bacteria called Acinetobacter, but also refers to others, and that's Alan Liebringer. So just one of the books on the shelf, looking at all their work, and it really is absolutely fascinating. It's absolute molecular medicine, and it's just really science. And I've got a picture to show you from this book to give you the gist of things. Although it's Acinetobacter, it's actually the same principles applying to the proteus and the collagen. I want to show you molecular mimicry in a picture. So although it's actually specifically linked to another bacteria, as far as the immune system is concerned, one's a bacteria and one is a tissue in the body. And so you can see through a mistaken identity and molecular mimicry, the body can then attack itself. Interesting, huh? And then I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Ari Vojdani for 20 plus years. And he's a friend, and I've actually got to obviously his son. I actually remember his son when he was a young lad, but now he's a brilliant immunologist of his own kind, Elroy, his son. They've written this other another great book. So I've got In Good Company today with Palmer there. This is again, it's not a book for the light-hearted. It's about the same cost as Alan Liebring's, but a lot more pages in it. But a very, very useful guide book on this, and this helps to expand the consciousness of what we appreciate underlying causes of autoimmunity. So we talked about bugs and its molecular mimicry, and I've given you a story, and I've given you the name of Alan Liebringer. It's really by my inspiration. And then Ari Vojdani in the background as well, basically providing that. And then this book was out in 2019. And so it's just, and since 2009, I have basically focused and perhaps, dare I say it, specialized, although I hesitate to use that word, because we all need to be super generous as practitioners when we're dealing with an autoimmune condition, because it's so many different systems of the body. It's not just one. It's not just the immune system. And I have seen many, many clients resolve their conditions and or manage their condition much better they had than otherwise, and also coming off or reducing medications. I'm never going to use the word cure in that sense. So not everyone's got completely better by any means, but many patients have made, the majority have made improvements, the vast majority have, and it's been a wide array of conditions. So I'm just going to name those conditions, and then I'm going to sort of go further into what the functional medicine practitioners are taught are the underlying causes of autoimmunity, and then we're going to add a few more effectively. So I have seen clients with, I've just got a little list here, but I've seen clients with MS who don't have MS anymore. I've seen a client with scleroderma, which is interesting, scleroderma of different types, where it affects the outer sort of connective tissue or the inner, and the inner potentially is more dangerous as the internal organs become negatively affected. But I did meet a man with scleroderma who literally, his arm was like a mannequin. I kid you not. He held out his arm. It's as if he held out a fake arm that was a plastic mannequin arm, and his skin and his connective tissue was so tight. Unfortunately, it hadn't actually affected his internal organs, but there was a threat that was the case. And his condition has significantly improved. I've had clients with sarcoidosis whose conditions and lung function has absolutely improved, and the doctors have marveled at that. I've had clients with lupus. I've had clients with Hashimoto's. I've had clients with psoriasis. I've had clients with uveitis. I've had clients with transverse myelitis. I've had clients with inflammatory bowel disease. And all of these conditions, I've had tremendous improvements. I've definitely had clients that have basically resolved at least one time those conditions, but if not improved tremendously, and had a greater understanding about themselves and about how to look after themselves with those conditions. So it's been a fantastic thing for me to be able to be a facilitator for that. I always feel blessed for that. And I'm not seeing these people necessarily right now, but certainly firm professional friends for life, that's for sure. And then they've been very kind sometimes to actually refer their friends in needs with other autoimmune conditions or other conditions. And that again gets to expand my consciousness of how to help them. And in every single case of these autoimmune conditions that I'm talking about, I have conducted a laboratory test looking for the presence of bugs in every single one. I'm not saying that and I could easily have missed other things, that, you know, we get wiser and we can have 20/20 hindsight vision. We say, gosh, I wish I'd done the toxic metal test on that person, or I wish there was a better pesticide test to look for that person. But each of the individuals that they're tested, I used kinesiology and muscle testing to indicate whether they had a hidden infection of some kind or other. And I had vials, so as muscle testers do, lots of vials, and identified the bugs that came up, depending on the vial, and bacteria or viruses. And then we said, well, let's just test for those where we can, and where those tests are available. So we tested for 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 bugs. Each test, of course, costs maybe £100, and so it needs to be limited as to how many we do. And in every single example, there were higher levels of antibodies present than that which should have been the case. And the majority of them was IgG, not IgE or IgA or IgM, which is more of this sort of IgM and IgA are the active current antibodies, but they had a raised level of IgG. And then I thought, well, you know, how is this historical? I've had the infection, I'm immune, IgG, how is that involved? And I read some of the work of Jose Montoya, who's been recommending antivirals for his autoimmune clients, Dr. Jose Montoya, and I thought, well, that's interesting. He finds a level of IgG, I think he does 5-fold above the reference range, and then it's an issue. And he's using antiviral drugs to ameliorate the conditions, I think, in a variety of different autoimmune conditions. So I thought there is a point of principle here, but I'm using a sort of a more of a, well, listen, you've got this condition. It hasn't come from nowhere. It's come from somewhere. I wonder if this could be one of the factors, or one of the contributory factors to it. And then I've addressed it, and the clients have done better. Now, not everyone has done as well as other people, and it definitely it gnaws at me, I would say, and it probably shouldn't gnaw me, but I shouldn't allow it to. But GNAW, it gnaws at my desire to learn more to help those individuals, and I'm sure that I have the capacity to learn it. Because the same things I've done with one client whose 8 brain lesions disappeared and didn't have MS anymore, I recommended a very similar sort of protocol with muscle testing to identify. So it's a unique program with another lady with MS, and it didn't really have the same effect. So I'm missing something. There's something else there. So let me now go back to that typical list of things that, as functional medicine practitioners, we are taught. Here are the typical causes of autoimmunity. Toxins, yeah, toxins. Toxins of all kinds. So it's petrochemicals, it's plastic chemicals, it's heavy metals, it's toxins from the environment. And you may be familiar with a film called Dark Waters, and there's also a film that Susan has put out as well, which I want Susan or Stephen certainly to maybe put in the chat box to alert us all to, because that's super relevant. The environmental toxicity issue is massive. So toxins are appreciated in inverted commas our world to be a contributing factor to autoimmunity. I'll talk to you more about how Ari Vojdani has actually helped to sort of verify that with tests as well. It's been very, very interesting. And then there's infections. Yes, infections have been known, and so we know Epstein-Barr virus, perhaps the most classic viral infection. About 95% of the population have some sort of reaction to it, suggesting that we've all been exposed to it. We know Epstein-Barr virus, particularly perhaps with Hashimoto's, the most common autoimmune condition, but it also can drive a whole range of others. And it can also be more of a bystander in some autoimmune conditions, where it's sort of not playing a direct role, but more of an indirect role. So you've got infections. And then we've got leaky gut. So this thing called leaky gut, increased intestinal permeability, allowing all that antigenic material through the gut and then overwhelming the immune system and setting up antibody productions. So we've got toxins, infections, leaky gut. And then within that sort of one of those sort of Venn diagram overlaps that we get to see, okay, we've got genes. It needs to be a genetic disposition. Yeah, there's got to be genes involved. Always genes involved, support the gene studies, etc., and the genome, and yeah, it's the genes. But what makes me curious is that an HLA-B27 and ankylosing spondylitis, just to name one particular subject, HLA-B27 positive, and you need that to be predisposed to and have ankylosing spondylitis, or AS, which is a type of arthritis that affects the spine. Again, we know that you actually need the bacterium Klebsiella pneumoniae, which is originally found in the lung, hence the name of the lung, Klebsiella pneumoniae, in the gut, combined with the gene HLA-B27 in order to manifest AS. But it's only 1 or 2%, I understand, of people, or less, that with HLA-B27 that actually have AS. So clearly it's not a genetic condition. Otherwise, everybody with that gene would have it. So you need the right environmental factors. And so it's Klebsiella pneumoniae. You take that away, and Alan Ebringer is the man, Professor Alan Ebringer is the man that put AS and Klebsiella pneumoniae on the map. And maybe a number of us listening right now that are familiar with that connection. And he was the man that said, yes, we need to have a lower carbohydrate, a lower starch diet, so we don't feed the Klebsiella, and then we don't end up with worse ankylosing spondylitis. And lo and behold, yes, anybody I know in this world who's got AS, they have a low starch diet and it helps them. But then they get to discover the truth that actually maybe Klebsiella is the thing that she's starving. And if you kill the Klebsiella pneumoniae, let's be frank, we're going to kill it, we're going to eradicate it. Maybe they don't have to worry about their diet so much in the future. So I've had clients with AS, and we've been able to prove it with a stool test through doctors' data. They've got a new test which is relatively new, it's GI360, but they've got this tandem mass spectroscopy stool testing capacity to measure bugs of all kinds, and Klebsiella pneumoniae comes up, you treat it and eradicate it relatively straightforwardly, but it can take 6 weeks, 12 weeks. It can take a while for some folks. It is true. Not using antibiotics. I'm not a doctor, I'm a nutritionist. And so I've had clients with AS whose AS is resolved, basically. Then I've had some clients who we get rid of the Klebsiella and we do a repeat test and it's not there. Muscle testing says it's not there, but they eat starch and still they can get some symptoms of AS. And so I can't get to the bottom of it, but I'm acknowledging that it's not always as straightforward as just get rid of the bug and then you can eat what you like. And maybe there's some epitope, which is sort of like it's an immune recognition that connective tissue in the spine should be something that the body should react to. Maybe there is some of that occurring, but otherwise, again, we've got genes. It's not just genes. We've got AS, we've got another autoimmune condition, and of course there are 80 different autoimmune conditions, and apparently there are 217 total that could be. So there's an awful lot of autoimmunity around, and so we've got toxins, infections, leaky gut, and genes. So we go, okay, so assess all these things, and we go from there. Well, what about an imbalanced gut microbiome? So I guess that might be referred to as dysbiosis, perhaps, or an imbalanced microbiome. So dysbiosis, I'm sure, is part of that autoimmune disposition. After all, the interface between the mucosal immune system and the body is very much in the gut, and they said 70% of the whole of the immune system is within the common mucosal immune system. So dysbiosis could be a factor too. So toxins, infections, leaky gut, which could be well connected with dysbiosis, and genes. But there are other things too. And this is where I refer to Dr. Alex Vasquez's work, and indeed to absolute recognition of Palmer Kippeler, who's right there. The stress factor. Yeah, stress. Chronic sympathetic overdrive is one way of calling it, but you could call it stress, duress, etc. So then we recognize the importance of adverse childhood events or early adverse life events, EALs and ACEs. And so we can look back and say, well, blimey, if these things can actually lead to depression and dare I say, subclinical hypothyroidism, this thing called adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency, and we've got a whole range of maybe heart disease and maybe, all kinds of other conditions. If we have adverse childhood events, it sets us up for a lot of things, including mental health issues as well. Maybe, just maybe, though, those things could also lead us to an increased disposition to autoimmunity. But also, you could just simply have You can have workaholism. You could just simply be stressed. You could simply be working too hard and reach a sort of burnout and increase your risk. So that's what I like about Palmer's book, is that it absolutely addresses the stress factor, which is such a real life thing for all of us. And it's such an important factor. But clearly, stress doesn't cause autoimmunity. Otherwise, everybody would have autoimmunity. So there must be other things going on. And so stress leads to compromised gut lining. So increased levels of adrenal hormones inhibit the healing capacity of the body. And the healing of the body is no more quicker than it is in the gut lining. So the quicker the tissue turning over, the more likely it is for something that compromises that process to have a negative impact on that tissue. Outside skin, how many days does it take for the outside skin to be remade, I wonder? So I'm asking the question now of the lovely audience we have. And I can't all see, but I'm going to say about 28 to 30 days. Maybe it's a bit longer, maybe it's a bit shorter. Maybe for a bit older, it takes a bit longer. Maybe that's true. Of course, some of us have cross-links in our protein collagen anyway, so it won't heal in exactly the same ideal way as it might have done. But the inside skin takes 2 to 3 to 4 days effectively to be remade. And so anything that compromises that, including stress, which could be linked to insomnia as well, but any extra stress, and that can be compromised, and that can increase leaky gut. So maybe it's stress with leaky gut in certain individuals can then trigger the autoimmune condition which their genes are disposing them to. But in the same breath I hear you say, I thought and I heard, and I think it's true, that if you have one autoimmune condition, you're maybe likely to have another one. And often the first one that gets diagnosed is the first one you know about. You don't even know about the second one. But then there are people who do actually have a mixture. And I've got a very good friend who actually has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility, and of course those individuals are prone to autoimmunity, and has celiac and Hashimoto's, and in the muscle testing she has another one, but we can't find out what it is, but we know it's to do with the gut. She's got, it's not pernicious anemia, but she has it's not colitis, so it's celiac, Hashimoto's, and she has another autoimmune process going on in the body, and she has Ehlers-Danlos. So we got a connection between Ehlers-Danlos and the celiac, and she must have the celiac genes therefore. So we got the sort of overlap, but you're going to have your genes are going to be switched on by these various factors, and we want to aim to minimize those factors. But once the genes have been switched on, it may be very challenging to switch them off. So even if you, let's say leaky gut was a cause, and then you heal the leaky gut, and you can prove it with whatever tests, sonin tests, whether it's a PEG test or it's even the old testing of mannitol and lactulose, and you can get indication, okay, the leaky gut's been resolved, mucosal immunity is good, secretory IgA levels are fine, so why isn't my condition getting better? And so it's quite a challenge to actually involve, to change that scenario. So we've got toxins, infections, leaky gut, the genes are involved, there's no doubt, dysbiosis and stress. And stress, of course, implies that there's actually an imbalanced levels of hormones, but there can also be an imbalance in the nervous system as well. So I would assert those are the major causes. Now we're faced with 200,000 toxins on planet Earth, maybe not all at once, thank goodness, but in this sort of toxic barrel. And I understand, Susan, that you had the pleasure of having Joe Pizzorno give a presentation on the subject of toxins, and I've read his book, and I commend him for his own money investment in the process too. So hats off to him for more than that reason. And I've been following him. I had the pleasure of meeting him in 1997 for the first time. And been following his work, and congratulations to him on so much that he's contributed to this field. But the toxins will never ever be a subject that will ever put, but okay, we sorted that one, we've got that one covered, we can move on beyond toxins. Toxins will always be ever present, absolutely vital. Infections, so it's the viruses and the bacteria that I first got really into with regard to autoimmunity. And I mentioned Proteus, I mentioned Prevotella, I've mentioned Klebsiella. But there are other, and then it's the EBV, I mentioned that too, so it's virus. So it's bacteria, it's viruses, and you've got chlamydia pneumoniae, but it's of the lungs. So it's not chlamydia trachomatis, which is a sexually transmitted one. So I'm hesitant to use the word chlamydia because people immediately assume that someone's been sleeping with somebody else, essentially, that's the bottom line, when they haven't. It's chlamydia pneumoniae. So I refer to it as CP, because it's a better way to converse. There's also Mycoplasma pneumoniae as well. And I've also had the great pleasure in knowing and listening to lectures of the great Dr. Garth Nicholson, who taught us about the biology of the cell membrane in the 1980s and was actually nominated for a Nobel Prize. Had the great pleasure of meeting him. I think it was in the same meeting that I met Ebringer. What a great event that was in Seattle. Had the pleasure of meeting him, and he identified the presence of a variety of these bugs, but it was HHV6, it was Mycoplasma pneumoniae, it was Epstein-Barr virus, Chlamydia pneumoniae, and EBV present in multiple numbers of autoimmune conditions. And he found a way through something called membrane replacement therapy, also known as lipid replacement therapy, of helping to shift those bugs out of the system. And maybe I'll come on to that. So we've got eminent folk that I've basically, I can't say I'm standing on anyone's shoulders. I'm more at their shoelaces, actually, just sort of like looking up their trouser leg, which is not inappropriate. It's just, I'm up there. These giants have said 35 to 40 years of dedicated, committed work. I get to read a few papers, and then suddenly I get to help the next client that comes in the door with an autoimmune condition, which they wouldn't have been able to get help in any other way, effectively, because we're dealing with the underlying causes. And so with the great help of German laboratories, there's a fantastic, again, another professor, who's actually Dr. Armin Schwarzbach, running Armin labs in Germany, because we don't have these labs in the UK. There's no lab in the UK that measures appropriately the bacteria and the viruses. Would that I had immunoscience labs with Ari Vojdani's lab, which you do in the States, and I'm sure there are others as well, that can actually do appropriate testing. And so there's something called Ellis spot testing, or LTT, which is lymphocyte transformation testing, or Ellis spot testing, where you're measuring the non-antibody immune response to the bug. And so, as well as the ELISA testing, IgG and IgM and IgA. So you're looking at the antibody response, but what about the non-antibody response? And then the question arose, someone asked the question, I thought, why didn't I think of that question? It said, what does the immune system do when it first encounters a bug before it's developed the antibody? I'll repeat that question. What does the immune system do when it first meets the bug before it has the time to develop an antibody? It's actually what? It's a white blood cell. It's a lymphocyte response. You actually, that's like the homeland defense, or in English terms, it's like Dad's army. It's the local force that comes out to meet the bug, and actually you've got a lytic and a latent lymphocyte count, and this is what the Armin labs look for. So it looks at the effectively how the immune system is reacting to this bug it's completely separated to antibodies. And I've found numerous cases where individuals have a raised Ellis spot test and a completely normal and negative antibody test, reflecting that the antibodies aren't there to be measured. And so if you did the antibody test alone, you say, no, not an issue, don't worry, move on, take Humira, take methotrexate, it's all in your head. Maybe you should take an antidepressant as well. I'm being lighthearted here, but I've heard that so often. I don't mean to be too stereotypical, perhaps, in my commentary. And I certainly never wish to criticize any individual at all. It's really the system that I criticize. But then if you did the Ellis spot test and the LTT, you'd actually discover there were indeed raised levels of immune activity to these bugs, but the antibody count didn't show it. So really great insight. So again, being taught that information by Dr. Schwarzbach and his lab in Germany. So the German lab, so I had to get blood tests done in England, ship them intercontinental, well, not just within Europe, to get that testing done. So you have immunoscience labs and perhaps others in America to do this sort of testing, but it's been a real eye-opener. Some of the levels of the antibody that I saw were literally thousands of times higher than the reference range. Thousands. And I've had doctors say it was IgG, don't worry, that can't be involved. So an individual comes to me with extraordinary sort of dermatitis sort of rash, which could be like a lupus situation, but it's like all over their body. And I'm not sure it's a specific autoimmune condition, but it's they were recommending methotrexate and Humira and less, and steroids before that. And I said, I think it's a viral. I think it's varicella zoster. So I did varicella zoster test, and their level above the reference range was literally thousands above the reference range. So we addressed the varicella zoster, the rash went away, and they didn't have to take the medication and be on the medication for life, as they were told they were going to have to be. So it's the bug aspect and the viral thing has been very interesting. It's not just the Epstein-Barr virus, which is one of the herpes viruses. It's actually human herpes virus 4, and there's a family of 8 of the herpes viruses. And the herpes virus is the most common in the world, and they're probably the most likely to be contributory factors for autoimmune conditions. There are others for sure. And so I got to see Ari Vajradani at one of the Institute of Functional Medicine annual conferences. And I came up to him, he's in the corridor and he's so likable. So a long line of people wishing to speak to him. I said, Ari, quickly, HHV6 and autoimmunity. And he starts to nod. And he said, haven't you looked at the front page of my website lately? Of immunosciencelabs.com. I said, no, I haven't. He said, have a look there. And then he was rushed off and busy with other people because he's very generous with his time with others. So I went to look at his website. On his first page of the website, HHV6 is basically well documented to be associated with autoimmune conditions. Yes, it is. And then you don't have to look very far. So I thought, I've never been taught about HHV6. What is it? And of course, then there's HHV6A and B. And it's like gets more complicated. And there's HHV7 and HHV8. But I never was taught about these things. And you do a quick PubMed search. And I look at the old version now, and it's available till January, I think, 2021, before they go back to the slightly biased search engines that will be used in PubMed. And you put in HHV6 and autoimmunity, or HHV6 and MS, and HHV6 and other, and there are hundreds of papers. And so I think there are hundreds. Yes, I think there are hundreds. And so you think, wow. I thought I discovered it all by myself, but apparently it'd been in literature for a long time. But I discovered HHV6, and it was the antibodies to it. They don't distinguish them in the German lab between the HH6A and B. But nonetheless, when we address HHV6 with a number of very special remedies, and I'll share one with you that's proven to be effective for my clientele anyway, and again, inhibiting that virus has taken time. Sometimes it takes a year or more to put the virus into dormancy. And then the repeat testing. Now, what they haven't got, there is not an Ellis spot testing for HHV6. So I'm just going to backtrack. On this Ellis spot LTT testing, wouldn't it be great if that testing existed? And it was originally designed for toxicity. So it was originally designed to see if your immune system was reacting to toxins, but then they use the same technology with various different bugs. And the bugs are, I think it's Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, Yersinia, I think, has one. And I think there are 8 or 9, but there are only 8 or 9 bacteria and viruses to which there is an approved LTT Ellis spot test. And HHV6 is not one of them. So maybe a Christmas present one year for me would be an Ellis spot test for HHV6, because then we can get indication of the change in the individual's response to HHV6, because the antibodies take ages to change in my experience. So HHV6 is one of the bugs. And I found HHV6, EBV, chlamydia pneumoniae, mycoplasma pneumoniae, probably the most common. But there could be other bugs too involved in autoimmunity. And so Ari Vajradani confirmed, yes, HHV6 definitely involved. And in fact, then I look on the CDC website for what that might be worth. But they say, yeah, EBV and HHV6, both of them are involved in chronic fatigue syndrome. So yeah, so HHV6, not just autoimmunity, or is chronic fatigue an autoimmune condition? And I've heard that be said, but I think we need, I think each individual maybe needs to be looked at individually as to see whether there's an autoimmune role to play in it, as opposed to a purely mitochondrial issue of the nitric oxide peroxynitrite kind, the no cycle, which Dr. Marty Paul has taught us about, and I found to be very relevant and meaningful when it comes to treating or supporting individuals with chronic fatigue syndrome. So where are we? We're sort of in a journey of discovery of, gosh, yes, there are underlying causes that we can do something about. And I have found by testing the bugs in the array of conditions that I've listed to you already, that the vast majority of individuals, not everyone, and there has been disappointments, which again is something that clearly there's more to look at. And they're going to need to look at it more holistically and not just keep on chasing that one particular bug, if you like. Where we can change individuals' health. So what I didn't do is I didn't put these people on a detox program. I didn't put them on a heal your gut lining only program. I didn't put them on adrenal support program. I didn't put them on a sleep better, feel better program. I put them on an antiviral or antibacterial program and support their detox process. And virtually everyone had a die-off process or Herxheimer response to that process. And to me, the response they had, i.e. the Herx response, confirmed they must have had, because if I could take oregano until the cows came home and I wouldn't have any symptoms at all, I'd have no die-off, I might just smell a bit of oregano. But not everyone has die-off, and so the die-off confirmed they must have had a problem. And so the die-off has been a very, very good affirming process. It's a question, hopefully, is it being as short as possible and as painless as possible, or at least pain as possible. And I've had some people have waves of die-off, And I'm also aware of some people with Candida being a driving factor for MS, for example, as well. So it's not just those bugs, it's others. Now, I've just got a call coming in. I'm just going to take this because my wife only calls me on certain occasions. So just hold fire, hold fire. Hi, Annie. Yeah, I'm on my radio show live. Yeah, I'm presenting a radio show live to 50 people. And my wife didn't know I was with you all, so apologies for that. She don't normally ring me on certain occasions, like a child is locked out of the house or something. So apologies for the interruption. Oh, so inhibiting bugs. So I found that inhibiting the bugs produce a lot of great results. Now, it's not to say that I wish I engaged them on a detox process. So now I'm more aware of the importance of overall detoxification, and that's complicated in itself. So I'm certainly going to be engaging fundamentally individuals on an overall detoxification process. Then it's the question of which order do we do that in? And in the same time, are we going to make sure their gut lining is okay? And are they eating foods? Foods, I've missed that one off on the list. We've got toxins, infections, leaky gut, genes, dysbiosis, stress, and food reactivity. Now that is the last on the list, I think, of counting, maybe others, of course. And this is where Dr. Rojdan is, but food-associated autoimmunities, and you can also use it as a doorstop if it's because that heavy, but lovely, 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 absolutely brilliant. Love it. And I know that he and Datis Karagian have been working together as well. And he's another outstandingly knowledgeable individual. But the food-associated autoimmunities, really interesting. In certain conditions, you're more likely to have food-associated reactivity compared to other autoimmune conditions. And which is that? So again, multiple sclerosis, it seems to be something that I don't know why, and I think I shared this with one or two of you, but for some reason it attracts me, and clients with MS seem to be attracted to me, and so I see clients with MS, and hopefully it can have an impact on their health. And I was able to give a webinar on the subject a few weeks ago, and I really, again, really do. If you're interested in MS in particular, but also in overall immunity, Palmer's book is really good. It's great. It's almost, dare I say it, and you know, it's great. Following people's footsteps. You know, when have I ever said anything original? No, I'm just repeating things from other people. But it's almost the book I could have written, but it would be very different because I didn't have that original experience myself, which Palmer did. So again, you got a condition, and she found a way out of it, and now it's helping others. So hats off to you on that one. And so we've got these bugs. So food reactivity, fascinating. And so with kinesiology, we do food reactivity checks the whole time. So I've got clients with RA, and they weren't responding. She wasn't responding very well to the oregano approach. We felt we got rid of the Proteus. There wasn't any other bug present, and still 34 years old and beginning to have disfigured fingers. It's like, what are we missing? Leaky gut, okay, sorted. Toxins don't seem to come up, although of course a whole process of detoxification may play a role. And then we did the following. I then had to take every single food that she ate, put it in a food bag, label it, and put it in the freezer. And so every single meal she ate, she took a food out. She brought in tens and tens of food bags, all labeled up. And actually a partner came in at the same time, and so it's great to have somebody else. And we basically checked every single food with a food processing, food muscle testing, to see if she was intolerant to it, whether she was sensitive to it, whether it was the quantity that led to a problem. So basically it was 4 muscle tests for each food, and we identified remarkable things. And then I'm going to come on to Ari Vojtana's testing as well. I discovered that some foods that were fine to be eaten raw were not fine to be eaten cooked, and the other way around. Obviously, we've got to cook some foods, and some foods must be only be eaten cooked. But where foods could be eaten raw or cooked, let's take a carrot, for example, or broccoli even, you can have raw broccoli, or cauliflower, you can have raw veg, and she reacted differently to the foods that were cooked and not cooked. So that was intriguing. And we basically separated the list out, and we had a pile on the left-hand side of the chair and a pile on the right-hand side of the chair, and she basically ate the foods that she tested well to and avoided all the others. And she had a 50% improvement in her health in the coming weeks. And it had been troubling her for years. And it was kind of, wow, you know, even though she was already gluten-free, dairy-free, etc., she had been avoiding those foods, the gut wasn't compromised. It's just the food reactivity. There are tests in this country, in the UK, that can offer IgG testing. But it all depends really on how good the antigen is that the lab is using as to how effective and relevant that is too. But I still find they're relevant. So you've got a number of different labs that do that testing. Ari Vojdani's have been involved in helping the Cyrex labs. I'm going to have no attachment, by the way, to any labs in terms of lab testing and recommending these things to you all. But the Cyrex lab tests offer an IgA and IgG reactivity to foods of the widest array of antigens, the raw and the cooked food. And so it's the multiple food reactivity test. It does cost a few dollars, and it costs even more pounds, actually, relatively speaking. Very, very useful test effectively to identify that. So either you use kinesiology testing as I described, where someone brings in all the food and you check every single food, and again we have 4 tests per food, and something I would do with all autoimmune clients now is, if not all clients anyway, is do that super thorough testing. Is bring in all the food you eat as opposed to standard testing vials, and test the foods that you eat and test them against you to see how big a factor it is. And what I do is I would work with a sequence is, if I can, look at what's the priority. Okay, let's say the infection was the priority, HHV6 or Proteus, for example, or Klebsiella. We look to clear that with the antimicrobials, if that was a priority. And then when that's less of an issue, it drops off being what I call a priority, and something else may come to the fore. And that may be, that's when we're going to get involved in the food testing as well. Always bearing in mind that individual stress levels can vary as well. And individuals can be okay with the food on month 1, month 2, month 3, but if there's a stressful process, and especially if there's die-off, which actually is putting them through a bit of a hardship, and other stresses occur, you can then end up with food reactivity to the foods that they've then been eating, because their overall mucosal immunity isn't robust enough to be able to be tolerant to the foods they're eating on that regular basis. So there's a lot to deal with. And so if we think about the way that medicine is siloed, it's siloed off. It's saying, okay, we've got this silo for this silo for this. So we've got toxins, so toxicology, and the professor of toxicology that taught me from a place called Surrey University in Guildford in South England, he told us unashamedly, he said, unless you study toxicology, you don't know about toxicology. And maybe it's the same with gastroenterology and immunology, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, unless you've actually been trained in toxicology, you won't understand it. You need to know it. And so I understand that. So toxins is a whole branch of functional medicine, but also, I don't know, there is a thing called toxicology in terms of helping people. What can medicine do to help toxicology? I don't know, give you more NAC? I don't know. Then you've got infections. Well, that's immunology and autoimmunology. Leaky gut, well, that's gastroenterology and possibly immunology. The genes, well, that's genetics. Leave it to the gene boffins. And what are they going to do then? What are we going to do with the genes? Are we going to go back in time and gene splice? I don't know. What are we going to do? And can we switch off the gene if we know what it is? No, we can't. So it's just sort of knowing. The gene is like knowing. And then what? I often find, well, what's the point? Well, now we know it, what do we do next? Dysbiosis, well, that's going to be gastroenterology. But of course, in the UK, the NHS stool testing apparently looks for 8 different bugs as opposed to 2,500 from the labs and the functional medicine laboratories. And you've got stress. Well, I guess that's psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, and maybe a GP to give you an SSRI. And you've got food reactivity, where of course food allergy is the only thing that really exists, and food reactivity doesn't really exist. It's a non-true allergy. And so that must be in your head. So that's probably down to psychiatry, food reactivity. So you can see how we've got different compartments. So as a functional medicine practitioner, we're aiming to be a super generalist and understand and put all these things together in the multidimensional creature, the human being that walks through our door. And when the man described the human being as just that, as a multidimensional spiritual organism made from stardust, you wonder who had said that, and that was the head of NASA. And so they had the man, so head of NASA science department was speaking it, and they then put his credentials up after he said it, which I thought was quite fun. Because you think this is a nutty description, but actually, oh, okay. And it wasn't, that famous physicist from NASA who wrote the book, who wrote the Contact, Carl Sagan. It wasn't Carl Sagan. It was somebody else. Okay, names. So we have that. So effectively, when I meet anybody with autoimmunity, and I'll challenge every practitioner to be thinking the same way, is that we've got all these variables to take into account. It's not just suppressing the symptoms would be useful to reduce the pain. So sure, introduce the green tea extract and the turmeric extract and and the probiotic help the gut, but it's about which of these do we need to deal with in sequence to clear the decks so the individual can be free of the condition as much as possible, and or certainly can look forward to a different trajectory for the future of their life, because they're able to totally get control of what's going on and have a better understanding of it. So it's a multifactorial, multidisciplined, super generalism requirement support for anyone with any autoimmune condition. And autoimmune conditions are on the rise, and they've been on the rise since antibiotics were introduced. They've been on the rise since clean hygiene. They've also been on the rise for another reason, which I almost hesitate to refer to, and that's the jabs. The jabs that have been introduced since 1989 in particular. The incidence of autoimmunity, I understand, certainly from looking at the statistics and listening to people much more expert on the subject than me, have rather massively increased as a result of the jabs that we got. And I know, I think I had 2 or 3. I'm 55. And then my kids have got, you know, a bunch of them. I think in America now, I think it's like 19 or something before the age of 18. And I see there's a plan list for, you ready? There's a plan list. So I think my grandmother, mother might have had 1 or 2 with the smallpox and polio, and I had BCG, polio, and smallpox probably, and so 3. And then my kids try to get them off and have as few as possible. And nowadays, about the 18-year-old kid, apparently there may be up to 18 or 19 different separate jabs or things they were taking. And in the pipeline, apparently, it's 270 total by the age of 18. Absolutely galling is what the insight into the plan will be. Absolutely hideous as a concept. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it's who do we know? Who do we know with an autoimmune condition? I bet we all know someone with an autoimmune condition. They're hugely prevalent. And if the older we get, the more likely you are to have one. It's true. And certain autoimmune conditions affect people at different ages. And with MS, I understand the average age, having given a presentation on it last week, it's 32. 32 is the average age. And you've got 5% of pediatrics. So the kiddies. Otherwise, it's older. So sure, you get older folk when they're first diagnosed, but the average age is 32. And definitely more women than men, as the vast majority are. Obviously, juvenile onset is going to be juvenile onset. Otherwise, the older we are, the more likely we are to have it. But now the autoimmune conditions are affecting younger and younger people, for sure. And so we live in a toxic world. We live in a world where our immune systems may be compromised because we don't have a strong enough immune system. Maybe the toxins have lowered our immune system and therefore more likely to have a reactivation of a virus that we've all been exposed to. Maybe there are retroviruses that are triggered too. So retrovirus is part of the gene makeup. Apparently 7 to 8% of the genes are retroviruses, and they could be triggered by the presence of HHV6 and EBV even. So you get a dual infection, you get the viral infection reactivated, then triggering a retrovirus, which can then promote the autoimmune activity. Fascinating, isn't it? So it's a double whammy. And that requires different treatment than just the oregano extract or indeed Tucuna extract for HHV6. So Tucuna extract is something I found to be effective against HHV6 specifically. It doesn't test up well kinesiologically with any other virus. Interestingly, it just seems to come up with HHV6. But I'd love to learn. You know, I'm talking to you and you're listening. I'd love to learn all your experiences so I could learn even more. And there's so much to learn. I mean, obviously the legends that have created all kinds of different protocols for Lyme, Borrelia, and co-infections and so on. And they're very cumbersome, and one almost always needs to use muscle testing or dowsing to be able to assess what individuals need. So there's lots to do. The great news is that there is an awful lot that one can do. And being aware of the underlying issues, you can then engage in those issues, even if it's one at a time. But the good news is, because of the synergy of things, if you help the gut lining, you're going to be helping reduce the inflammation. If you help the gut bacteria, you'll be helping a multiple number of things, including helping the liver as well. And so the overall approach to autoimmunity is that full-on assessment. And then it's deciding, well, what are we going to intervene on, in which sequence, in which combination code is going to best suit you, the individual, with this specific condition, because it may be different to the last person with that condition. So it's really, as ever with this area, so it's Sarah with MS as opposed to the 35-year-old lady with MS, you know, and they don't even give her a name, just a number. So it's always the individual with the condition. And of course, there are many individuals who are, I believe, encouraged to identify with their condition. So it's I'm saying, so yes, I've got MS, and so like, yes, my MS, and so they use my, and they're owning it and possessing it, as if they never want to be free of it, almost. And so I do my best to encourage individuals to use the right language about their condition. Of course, I don't want you to have it, but some people identify themselves with their condition. They join a group, which is a support group for the condition, and they get to feel like they're in a tribe of equally unwell people who are not going to get better. And they should dismiss any potential hope in getting better, because the man in the white coat said this is a condition for life and you're doing this medication for life, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. So books that say learn to live with, groups that persist the mythology that these medications are what you're required to treat it, are things that I do not approve of and do not like, he says, because it literally traps the person in a state of no hope. And all their life is the conversation about getting by with their condition, which which drives me crazy. There are other things that drive me crazy, and that is the supermarket announcements. So in the grocery store announcements about keeping certain numbers of meters away from other people in the supermarket, even though there may actually be only one person within 100 square miles that might have actually be unwell. 100 square miles, no, we must keep that. We must also wear a mask. So I've discovered a new condition. It's called COVID Tourette's. And I found myself verbally expleting. I've actually never sworn so much in my life. When I'm in a supermarket in particular, I swear out loud, uncontrollably. I've got a mask exemption badge on. I don't wear a mask. No way. I've just got exemption badge, which you can just print off from the government website, for goodness sake. Just no. In fact, and if anyone asks you about why you're wearing the badge, you have no obligation to answer them at all. There's no requirement for you to answer that by law. There's absolutely no requirement. So you can get yourself an exemption badge, and you have no obligation to answer any questions about why you're wearing the badge. If they're asking for GDPR private health information, it's not appropriate. So I got my badge on, but I've discovered I've got a new hidden disability, effectively, which is actually less than hidden, because it's more obvious than the hidden one for which I'm wearing the mask, and that is COVID Tourette's. I can't tell you, the words that come out of my mouth, I can't repeat on this particular show. It would actually not be appropriate for all ages. But I tell the person on the tannoy exactly where to go. It's uncontrollable. I can't help it. I find it just the most unbelievably insane, illogical phenomenon about somewhere that one person within 100 miles might be unwell, possibly with a condition which possibly might be at large, which was at large, which isn't now, which is well over. And everybody around is wearing a mask and stepping to one side in the aisle to make sure that they don't even breathe in the same air that I breathe. It's just gone to pot, hasn't it? Thank you for listening, folks. Now, I would love to answer questions for you on autoimmunity in particular. Love to do that. And I really appreciate your time and presence. I hope you found that to be helpful, interesting, and I'm sure if you have an autoimmune condition, there's which one have I got? Which ones affect me? And that's certainly the right questions to be asking. You know, which of these affect me? And can I get a hold of a functional medicine practitioner that can help to explore these things for me, so I can actually maybe at least keep my condition where it is, or even possibly ameliorate it, or even possibly reverse it in some way, and then maybe resolve it too.
We definitely have a lot of questions that have stacked up during your talk so far. But before we go in that direction, I'd like to kind of ask you about the extent to which you've been looking at redox phenomena as a potential basis for immune dysfunction, and not only in terms of antibodies being turned on and off, but in terms of how antigen presentation cells operate in terms of reacting to things and then passing on a message to say to the rest of the immune system, you know, fight this, or the opposite would be turn it off. And whether or not it's possible that we may have 1,000 autoimmune events in our life where most of them are shut off by the immune system as they happen. And it's only when we lose our redox control that the autoimmune cascades into an autoimmune disease.
It's a brilliant, in fact, it's a perfect follow on from my list, because my list wasn't meant to be complete, but actually I think I can add on to there. So it goes toxins, infections, leaky gut, genes, dysbiosis, stress, food reactivity. And I'm not saying that it should be at the bottom of the list at all, but it's actually oxidative stress and redox balance should absolutely be on there. And then underneath that, or possibly on top of it, very much linked with it, is inflammation, which is almost always associated with oxidative stress and redox balance, but can be from a different source. So inflammation may be a different definition to the redox balance, but definitely overlapping. And so inflammation, excess inflammation, and redox balance is a hugely relevant factor. And with the, so I believe you actually summarized it quite nicely, Stephen, is that I have particularly, in fact, I was actually reading about this last night, completely out of my choice of picking up a book and reading it. And it just happened to be about the work, oxidative stress to do with MS, actually, in particular. But I would assert in simple terms that an excess oxidative stress and incapacity to handle it, so the redox balance is not there, due to a lack of antioxidant enzymes. Oh, that light doesn't work. That one might do. Particularly to do with glutathione peroxidase, and lack of nutrients. And so the lack of nourishment that we've got in our food supply leads to lack of key minerals, zinc, selenium, maybe the two obvious, but magnesium as well, along with other B vitamins. Many nutrients play a role in immune function, but particularly zinc and selenium, I would say, and manganese as well. Then you end up with that non-stop, ongoing excess oxidative stress, imbalanced redox, and then it's more likely to switch the gene on, but involved in autoimmunity. But you're quite right, is that then with that process, it may be a process of repetition over time that leads to the antigen presenting cells to actually fail to switch off. Why we shouldn't be reacting to that. So the more oxidative stress you've got, the more inflammation you've got, the more likely you are, I believe, to engender an autoimmune phenomenon.
Have you used vitamin C therapeutically in any of your patients who have been, let's say, resistant to the oregano oil or other approaches to add redox control to the therapy?
It's brilliant. It's as if you're looking over my shoulder last night. I was thinking of a couple of cases of MS in particular that haven't done so well. And I was just thinking, I wasn't actually thinking of vitamin C specifically, but I was thinking, should I have gone in with higher levels of antioxidants and NAC, perhaps being an obvious one. I've got the various different forms of NAC, and vitamin E or the fat-soluble forms of water-soluble forms. Should I have gone in with a higher level? It's exactly the thought I had last night. It's uncanny you should ask the question. So the answer is no. I wish I had engaged with those individuals who hadn't responded more with the higher levels, the therapeutic levels. So that's definitely something for me, even though I've been engaged in this now for 11 years, specifically on autoimmunity. It's something that I believe I could do more of. Also, just to share with you and the listeners, with regard to MS in particular, is that I was reminded, and I knew it before, I was reminded of inosine as a sort of a B vitamin type supplement that helps to support levels of uric acid. And high levels of uric acid neutralizes peroxynitrite. And so low levels of uric acid have been found in those with MS. And I was aware of this, and I thought, I must get that blood test in the folk that don't respond as well as those who might, or others have. So I think there's a place for it, and so I'm conscious of it last night, aware of this conversation today, and this is part of the GNAW, the gnaw in me, because I've been aware of it but haven't always engaged in it. So hopefully we will learn, and I can learn from this conversation as well. So I believe it could be really useful, but I can't give you anecdotal information, unfortunately.
Okay, if anybody wants to ask a question personally, please feel free to raise your hand. If you can open up your participants window, you'll see the little hand there that you can click on and pop to the top of the menu. I'm going to slowly pass down through the chat and find questions, but if you can raise your hand and give me some time to find questions, that would be.
Yeah, I've just seen the chat, 71 chat. Oh wow. Yeah, I'd love to answer questions if I can. So let's, I'll try to.
How is biofilm playing a role in helping viruses evade the immune system or bacteria? Biofilm, rather elusive, because I'm not sure if we bumped into one, would we know what it was. It sort of feels like it's a sticky, mucousy thing that would get stuck on us, like from the alien films or something. But it is, I understand it's got to do, basically biofilm hides
bacteria and viruses away, and it's part of the putrefactive byproduct of their existence that actually makes up the biofilm. So the biofilm in itself is toxic when broken down, but the biofilm hides the bugs from the immune system, and that may be particularly relevant to perhaps more things like stealth pathogens, the Borrelia family and Babesia and so on. But I believe that the biofilm can definitely be a factor, and can be a factor for viruses and bacteria. I'm more familiar with it with bacteria, both in the gut and elsewhere in the body. And I've used proteolytic enzymes almost exclusively to help to break that down. And when individuals have a Herxheimer response from the proteolytic enzymes, it generally, and I've already kinesiologically tested that they have an infection, and we need to use the proteolytic enzymes first before we can engage in the antimicrobials, and they get a die-off, it generally tells me that they did have a biofilm issue, because that's what's being broken down, and it actually can increase the risk of Herxheimer type responses. So I believe it can play a role, and I would say that it's something I look for in every individual now, but I didn't do before, but I certainly do now.
Yeah, I'd like to also add that not only is biofilm based on protein cross-linking, it's also based on calcium cross-linking. And to the extent that one has a magnesium deficiency or a vitamin K2 deficiency, or maybe even potassium or calcium over supplementation, that can aggravate biofilm status.
Yeah, thank you for that. And of course, it's actually the calcium as well that aggregates in the atherosclerotic plaque, excess calcium. And so I'm trying to remember the last time I recommended calcium as a supplement to anybody. I can't remember the last time I recommended calcium as a single supplement on its own to anybody. I literally can't, but I do recommend calcium, magnesium, potassium to those with cramps on occasion. But otherwise, I can't remember the last time I recommended calcium specifically to anyone with osteoporosis or any other condition.
What's your strategic approach to treating Klebsiella infections?
Yeah, Klebsiella, I would use, I may use proteolytic enzymes for a week or two on an empty stomach in order to help make the antimicrobial more effective. And then I would use the ADP oregano, and I would use, I actually use a tannel bit, which is actually being discontinued by Intensive Nutrition. So we're actually we're on the lookout for a company that makes plant tannins. So plant tannins with the ADP oregano, maybe preceded by proteolytic enzymes, and I use proteolytic enzymes with the antimicrobials because I find they work more effectively. So that's a pretty simple answer. And obviously limiting the carbohydrate. Can take 6 weeks, can take 12 weeks. Yeah.
I got a technical question here. What is the German lab that you use for doing lymphocyte testing?
Yeah, it's called Armin Labs, A-R-M-I-N, after Armin is his first name. Armin Schwarzbach is the fantastic German doc, lovely guy. Armin Labs, and in the UK, there's an agent, which is AONM. So it's the association, I don't know, but AONM, it's an acronym, and they are the agents for the German lab, Armin Labs. And so I think you can type in AONM if you're in the UK, otherwise Armin Labs for those in Europe. So a fantastic lab, yeah.
We got two questions here about detox approaches for smoke from wildfires.
Gosh, yes. Something that, of course, I've seen in Australia first and then America second. The lungs are, of course, a hugely important part of mucosal immunity, and it can be quite challenging for nutrients that you take orally to actually have an impact on lung tissue. And if there is mucus involved, that can actually make it even more challenging. I guess it's kind of a viscous biofilm all of its own. And so to help the mucus, you may be aware that NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and I'm certainly a big fan of it in the sense that it seems to test up well for many as a majority of the population. I also use NAC enhanced antioxidant with trimethylglycine. So I actually got various different forms, and I also use NAC with glutathione and selenium. So I actually got 3 different types of NAC, and I discovered that, lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, different people need different ones. But I would consider NAC for anyone who's had a respiratory toxin burden, such as smoke, to help not only with the glutathione status in their body, which helps with that in the gut, in the liver, and the body, but also it helps to reduce mucus. It's a mucolytic agent. So I think NAC comes to mind immediately. There are some people may benefit from liposomal glutathione in addition to NAC. So I wouldn't hesitate to consider both types to have a bigger impact for better absorption with that burden. And then, of course, within the smoke itself, there may be a variety of different toxins that I'm not sure I even have the names of, but it may be, obviously, not just burning wood, but it may be burning other substances too, which then sort of aerosolizes and puts into smoke various different toxins. So I would say, glutathione support, and if there is mucus, then you want to break that down and help to eliminate it. There is a very useful, so it's more to do with a mucolytic agent rather than detox. This Mucolixir is an allergy research supplement, it's a liquid developed from a doctor who's working with cystic fibrosis. And he found that a special salmon DNA remedy, somewhat quirkily, had a significant impact on reducing the mucus in his cystic fibrosis clients. So where there's a need to reduce mucus, Mucolixir can be effective. It's a liquid remedy from a salmon DNA. It's very unique, that allergy research make. And the NAC, I think the coenzyme Q10 to oxygen transport, I think anything to do with oxygen transport will be useful. And for that, I'll also consider methylation support too. There's a specific supplement that helps oxygen use that I've used with athletes. That's, again, I'm being very specific, which is O-Organic 15. O-Organic with a K, O-Organic 15 from Biotics Research. I believe this will be good. I'm actually testing these things as I'm speaking to you, because I haven't had clients come in with a smoke thing. So I'm actually just going as to what would appear energetically to test up. So O-Organic 15, coenzyme Q10, NAC and glutathione, and there's one more thing. I believe proteolytic enzymes away from food to help to break down, proteolytic enzymes, a fantastic support for any detoxification program. But it seems on my, again, I haven't got experience, but I'm just energetically sharing that with you. It's testing up as one of the 5 most important things to consider.
Yeah, one of the things that helps me a lot whenever I get overwhelmed by smoke is vitamin A.
Yeah, and vitamin A,
not
very
beta-carotene.
Thank you. Very important for the lungs, vitamin A, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yes, vitamin A, yeah.
Got a question here. First, he says, thanks for so many significant insights, almost all unknown to me. What's the first thing that I should read or get up to date on your findings? The latest book seems to be from 2012. Thank you. Also, do you have any coursework that people can sign up for where they can, in a sense, build their foundational understanding of what you know?
Yeah, Stephen, such a great question. Well, Palmer's written this book. It's good. It's good. In terms of autoimmunity, this would be good. That would be a good book to get. I think this is an expensive book if you're looking at food reactivity. It's really looking at food reactivity, so it's very narrow. But I think in terms of autoimmunity, I really like it. I basically turned over every page when I got it. I just saw the contents and read through it. I believe that's a good start, the beta autoimmune one, just as a start. A wood that I had, and I've got a website. My website is called HaynesHealthManuals.com, and that's really referring to the English market, where Haynes was the company that made manuals for all the cars. So it's a reference to those books that we saw, yellow books. But Haynes Health Manuals, and I've started off with subclinical hypothyroidism, and I will move on to subjects, but unfortunately I haven't got the whole lot prepared yet for courses. So though in terms of courses for autoimmunity, I regret I can't really give an answer. It's a great question, and maybe certainly watch this space, and I'll be able to maybe supply Susan with some information, and maybe I could get my work rate even higher and create short courses. But I've got a little short video course on subclinical hypothyroidism, but I want to get a short course on autoimmunity, and then actually to delve into each individual condition that is most relevant, like Hashimoto's, MS, RA, Lupus, Scleroderma, Sarcoidosis, and Psoriasis, etc. And so that individuals can then have a feel for a generic sense. And maybe this comment, so thank you very much for your kind comments, and thank you for listening, helps me to bring that to the top of the pile.
I have a specific question that's not on the subject of autoimmune. It has to do with calcium and your views of the use of calcium channel blockers.
Yeah. Calcium channel blockers can be useful for helping individuals' blood pressure come down. There's no doubt about that. But magnesium is also a calcium channel blocker. Maybe one could consider magnesium in the first instance before the medication. All medications have side effects to some degree or other. So it's you know, calcium channel blockers is one method. But for me, there's such a pandemic of magnesium insufficiency that and then magnesium is needed to use vitamin D properly, right, as well. So if you haven't got the right levels of vitamin D, you won't be able to use calcium properly, and so that won't work. You haven't got adequate magnesium, so you can't actually have the positive interaction between the two minerals, and so you need magnesium to operate to use vitamin D properly. So I'm not, you know, the calcium channel blocker is only going to be used for high blood pressure, and therefore I would say why not consider magnesium in the first instance, and then you could consider another formula which is not a medication, which is not to do with calcium channel blocking, but can be very useful, and it actually contains taurine. Now taurine is also useful for the extracellular use of calcium as well as its other functions, and it's a BioCardioCert BP is a formula with a big dose of taurine and grape seed extract of a certain kind, and I found it to be effective with everyone I've recommended with high blood pressure, and I believe the taurine particularly helps with the calcium metabolism in it, interestingly. So magnesium would be my first thought. Vitamin D might be another thought, and then the BioCardioCert B from Biotics I found to be a very effective antihypertensive remedy that might negate the need for any medication.
Can you repeat the probiotic that your patient found useful for Crohn's, and
Yes.
to what extent do you think that that is specific for that person, and how applicable would it be for other people?
Yeah, I've conducted research on the probiotics for Crohn's and colitis, and different strains have been looked at by various different researchers, and so there are a limited number of strains, and nowadays it seems to be the strain that really is the thing, as opposed to the family name. So we got Lactobacillus, the family name, and then we got Rhamnosus GG, which is the one I specifically refer to. It's the most studied probiotic bacteria on the planet Earth. Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, coming out of the stable of Tufts University, and from two professors, Golden and Goulback, I think, were their names. GG. So that's the supplement I use. It has been used and found to be effective to some degree in Crohn's. I've recommended the Lacto G to virtually every other client I've seen with Crohn's, and I haven't had the same magical impact that seemed to have on that one individual. So yes, undoubtedly it was an anecdote, but nonetheless, I have found it to be effective in virtually all cases of inflammatory bowel conditions, this most studied probiotic on the planet. It doesn't mean to say that other strains won't be more effective, but just that one individual seemed to suit him perfectly.
Okay, it looks like I've gotten to the bottom of the list. If your question wasn't answered, please bring it to my attention, or please raise your hand and ask Anthony yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking at, I've opened the chat.
There were some more questions here. How does mold toxicity react to, create food sensitivity?
How? Oh, good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. The ochratoxin A might be the most well-known mold, and the tests are now available and have been available from Great Plains, perhaps originally, and we access the Great Plains lab in this country through agents here. And I think mold toxicity is a bigger issue in the United States than England, but nonetheless it's still a factor, and I think it's got to do with the building construction, dogma. The buildings need to be made of a certain width within the walls, and it's a perfect breeding ground for mold. I believe that so it's an architectural issue actually on some levels, and not just the weather in New Orleans. So how does it do it? Well, mold effectively you're generating an immune response effectively, and it's also toxic. The mold responses, so it's a toxic response, so it's an inflammatory response, and all inflammatory responses can increase, if it's occurring anywhere in the gut, increases the risk of food sensitivity, food reactivity. So you're going to get an IgG reactivity. So the more inflammation there is, the more likely you are to develop antibody responses to it. And this is actually leading me on to a conversation which I didn't have during my presentation bit about Dr. Ari Vojdani's work, where he identified he's looking at toxins, and he looked at, basically the question is, why is the immune system attacking that particular tissue, and what's going on? Is it molecular mimicry, or if it's not molecular mimicry, why is that attack occurring? And he discovered that actually it wasn't the cell that was being attacked by self, it was actually the cell with foreigner in it. So it's the cell with toxin, and it was the toxin in the cell that led the immune system to say, oh, I don't recognize you. You're actually not the healthy guy. So it's actually toxins bound to proteins or bound to cells that the immune system reacts to. And he has an autoimmune toxicity panel as one of the profiles. I think it's RA11. I might have to check that. In terms of the chemical toxicity, it's actually measuring the toxins that are sort of stuck to tissues, as it were, embedded in tissues that the immune system is reacting to. And the same may be also happening with moles. Again, it's the generation of oxidative stress, redox balance imbalance, pro-inflammatory, increased TNF alpha, increased interleukin-1, increased interleukin-6, and reduced glutathione, all leading to disposition to autoimmunity, amongst other things.
Another question was, are Proteus and Prevotella heavy metal resistance? For example, does the mercury from amalgams get swallowed and starts the imbalance?
Yeah, good question, good point. Heavy metal resistant. Can heavy metals basically upset the balance of gut bacteria? Is that the gist of that?
Rachel can chime in on that one.
Yeah, Rachel. Yeah, so with toxic metals, yeah, huge potential source of imbalances, and I believe it certainly can upset microbiome, the gut microbiome. But in terms of the actual direct impact on Proteus and Prevotella, I don't know. I simply don't know.
Okay.
How about Rachel?
Oh, hi. So thank you so much for this presentation. I'm overwhelmed because I'm so happy to be here because you address so many things going on in my family. So I wanted to ask you to repeat that support for the hypertensive, like the magnesium, the vitamin D, and then what was that one last?
I'll tell you, yeah, for sure, Rachel. Yes, and then I know I speak quickly and I speak a foreign language sometimes.
Yes.
The pleasure to have you there. Really is. And sorry I can't see you, but thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Magnesium is nature's tranquilizer mineral, and it's very important for the relaxation. And so lack of magnesium, end up with cramps, potentially also linked with potassium. Potassium helps with the gates to allow magnesium in the cell as well. So there was a synergy between electrolytes. But often magnesium is lacking, and stress can lack it. And so stress can deplete magnesium from the cell, and then you don't get it restored. And it might not be restored because you have a lack of antioxidants, it's true. But magnesium is certainly something to consider in a whole variety of forms. It's chloride, gluconate. You've actually got oxide, very poorly absorbed. You've got citrate, you've got amino acid chelates, and you've got glycinate, and you've got malate. So you've got a whole variety of different forms of magnesium, and it's worth considering upping the magnesium state to improve someone's blood pressure. Vitamin D may be useful because it helps to use calcium properly. And once you've got your magnesium up to speed, maybe then you can use vitamin D properly and not have calcium be in the wrong place, as it were. And the specific powdered supplement that Biotics Research make is called BioCardioCert. So BioCardioCert BP, specifically designed by an associate professor of hypertension, who I've been a big fan of for about 25 years. He's the famous, and I don't know if he's infamous, but he's certainly famous in my world in cardiology, Dr. Mark Houston.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Rachel. BioCardioCert BP is a formula he put together, and it contains a useful dose of taurine and grapeseed extract in particular.
Excellent. Oh, quickly, I'm finding that for me, magnesium chloride is the most absorbable form for me. Is it Epsom salt bath, or can I take that internally?
The magnesium chloride, obviously I've only seen it in liquid form. I haven't seen it in a capsule form, but liquid form magnesium chloride, and it works through that sort of electrical gradient pathway. And I found it can be the most useful form of magnesium. Again, on the muscle testing, I found that different people need different magnesiums, and I've long tried to figure out to have a 1-hour webinar on knowing what magnesium to use for what person, and I haven't got that. I just can't figure out what the patterns are to determine that. But if you found, I'm glad you've got the magnesium chloride. It's also relatively low dose magnesium, but I still find it to be effective. And you might find that another form of magnesium can work as well alongside that for a high dose, should you need that.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
magnesium chloride is hard to package in a solid form because it's a desiccant, and it absorbs water out of the air, it absorbs water out of the capsule, so it's very difficult. So it's usually found in a concentrated liquid form, which is so powerful that nothing can grow in it. So you don't need preservatives.
Thank you.
Very good. My feeling is, Rachel, the magnesium glycinate, which is an amino acid chelate, so it's carried across, might be an appropriate form for you, just as a thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carol says her experience exactly the same as yours, that different people respond to different forms, and you just try them.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
I can see a question. I'm sorry. There's the best source of proteolytic enzymes. Yes, proteolytic enzymes. Yes, Sandy, you are spelling that correctly. Correct. Congratulations, proteolytic enzymes. So I've been a huge fan. To me, it's one of the best tools in my toolbox, if that's the right expression. I've used, for 25 years, I've used Intenzyme Forte, which is a mixture of bromelain, papain, chymotrypsin, and trypsin. I found that the bromelain on its own doesn't work. Bromelain and papain doesn't work as well as the bromelain combined with the trypsin and chymotrypsin. I've used it against, trialed it against serrapeptase with quite a number of clients who've already been taking serrapeptase. They've moved on to Intenzyme Forte and found that that works very well. It's also been trialed against Wobenzyme, the famous German proteolytic enzyme, and Intenzyme Forte appears to match that as well. So I haven't really had any recourse to use any other, simply because I found this one to be so effective. In fact, it's just on my, it's just here. I got it. I have absolutely no financial connection with Bartics research and buying it. We distribute this in the UK, but there's no financial connection. So Intenzyme Forte, and after a hard game of tennis, let's say on a hard court, I might take 10. They're pretty small tablets, pretty small. And otherwise for Biofilm, I would say 9 or 10, maybe once a day on empty stomach. 8, 9, 10 on empty stomach for Biofilm breakdown, and very good for anti-inflammatory. I find it's a fantastic adjunct. Something you simply can't get from nature, that we require modern technology to put into supplement form for our benefit. Tucuna Extract is for the elimination and inhibition of HHV6, not so much for the detoxification. Tucuna, I believe, is available from Takuna. I believe Nutrimedics is one company that makes that. Answer that question. And the name of the supplement I refer to help the lungs for oxygen use is O Organic. So it's double O, and then the word, so it's the word organic with a K, with double O at the start, and then -15. That's a Bartics research specific supplement. Okay. Again, thank you all for your time, and would that we could all be together. Our website is hayneshealthmanuals.com, and Haynes, Haynes, hayneshealthmanuals.com. It's got my subclinical hypothyroid stuff on it, but it will be going on to autoimmunity.
And if this is your first time seeing Anthony in action, there is a previous talk that he did here at SVHI on YouTube that you can get into. So please check out that resource.
Again, thanks, Stephen, very much for you and for everything you do.
It was great to have you back.
Thank you.
We should have you back every month. Yeah,
Susan asked me, and I said yes. It's just a question whether your lovely audience we could stand that.
You got good participation, so
I have presented 300 webinars in my life on a wide array of different topics, and of course I can't help but, because I've had clients that have had these conditions, it really helps to drive the relevance of the information. And I generally have used kinesiology and muscle testing to actually get further insights too.
Have you ever met practitioners that couldn't learn how to do it?
Oh, good question. No. I've met many practitioners who've been challenged by the process of it, and then but practice. Is that what you meant, Stephen?
Well, I actually saw somebody try to teach somebody to do it, and that person was maybe skeptic is the right word,
Mm-hmm.
where they were in their own way, and
Yes.
it appeared that that person could not learn how to do it, and I don't know if that's just because of their disconnect between their conscious mind and their subconscious mind or something like that.
I think you just nailed that one. Yeah. So any practitioner who's willing to engage in learning it, then they can. But if you're skeptical, I wouldn't even want to test someone who's skeptical, let alone have them engage in the actual process of muscle testing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like the placebo response, that you have to believe it.
Although it's not a religion, of course, so it's a science. So
yeah, but lots of sciences are built on belief.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the whole science of placebos is built on the assumption that the patient believes that the placebo is not a placebo.
yeah,
or believes that the placebo is a placebo, but they know.
Yes, and it's a great philosophical conversation, which I'm sure that on the balloon debate I'd be sinking and you'd be floating. But I would say that I share this with you, is that I've kept account with my 1 times table of 614 laboratory tests over the last period of time. It's quite a lot of years of lab tests where I've done 1 lab test per client that I've muscle tested, and some of the clients, definitely some of the clients have gone, what on earth is that? But Johnny, Sarah said you are good, so okay, whatever you say, but I'm not sure about this at all. So let's get a lab test to show the evidence that this thing is present. And I mean, 35 different lab tests in the 614 lab tests that I've gotten back, and 609 of the lab tests are the same as the muscle test. 609 out of 614 lab tests indicating that, okay, it's blastocyst somnolus or HHV6, or it's lead, or it's a lack of magnesium, or it's and we've done these tests, and the 35 different lab tests. So it's mostly been, it's blood tests, urine tests, saliva tests, and stool tests, and 609 have come back the same as the muscle test. All I'm saying is that not by no means were all those people convinced that muscle testing worked at all.
No,
So,
but what about you and your reactions to the 5 exceptions? Did you have anything, did you learn anything from those 5
yes,
exceptions?
it was interesting. Yes, I just missed them. I just missed them. It was interesting because it was so close. It was, and I wish I'd done a wider array of testing. But you're right. In fact, I feel like I'm not sure I can actually, although I'm aware of the 5 and actually painful sort of, oh no, how can I got that one wrong sort of thing. The ego got hurt on that one. I think, yeah, it's a good question. I haven't been able to do a full audit on those 5, other than probably just recoil from the pain of getting it wrong. So my ego run, but it's about so I think basically what I found was that I tested one particular virus, and I should have done a viral array on one of those. Another one, I should have done a wider mineral screen, and I did a lower. Again, I was looking for a particular mineral rather than an array. So I think it teaches me just to possibly just pan back a bit. But I'm sure I was in the right pitch, but I just didn't necessarily look for the right specifics. But I'm aware that my testing absolutely can be influenced by things. And my wife's a muscle tester, more qualified than I am, but I've been practicing it a long time. And we challenge each other, dare I say it, daily on the muscle testing. And I mean that. We absolutely in the highest and the best good, make sure we do the first checking, and it's feet on the ground, and it's really sort of rooted. And so I'm actually healthily skeptical of muscle testing. I engage with it, and I recommend everyone should be. And I'm just always wishing to find the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and not get my bias involved or projected on the client.
Okay, it's time to save your chat. If you're
1 moment.
there's marvelous information there buried
There's
in the
another
chat.
question here.
Oh, Mary just popped up.
There's a question about chronic fatigue syndrome and avoiding die-off products.
If you've got chronic fatigue and you're engaged in a process that elicits, especially if you've got a bug and you've got chronic fatigue, and obviously Epstein-Barr virus and other viruses may be a factor, you want to inhibit the replication of that virus for sure. So you definitely want to inhibit that. And there might actually be some sort of die-off, and that actually may then knock the person sideways. It may actually reinstigate the no cycle, So you've actually got a worse fatigue as a result of having taken an antimicrobial, let's say, that's part of the resolution to the underlying cause of the chronic fatigue. So in that case, I would ease off the antimicrobial, support the detoxification pathways, which might well be the gut and the liver, very straightforwardly, and or it might be cellular. So there might be a cellular detoxification support, in which case that might involve slightly different support. So there's gut support for detox, liver support for detox, cellular support for detox, and I would do my best to figure out which of those the individual needs more of if they have chronic fatigue and have a DARF. But I wouldn't want necessarily to stop the process of inhibiting the virus, let's say, in particular the virus to do with chronic fatigue, but to minimize, I might ease off, literally ease off that, but keep some pressure there. And support the detoxification processes.
Mary?
Yes. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Mary.
I noticed that you were using, I think, a short form of muscle testing during this talk. You were using your hand. Could you show us that?
Yeah, I sure can. There's you can use O-ring testing, and there are various different ways. You can use your finger this way. You can use, I believe the middle finger or the forefinger, but so I can use the middle finger. And then there's the pulling apart with two pulling apart, so that way. But I use this way. So I use a push with this of this circuit here. So I sort of just do checking, and I find it's a good way to keep me routine. So my name is Anthony. I push apart and it's strong. So my name is Stephen, and it goes weak. My name is Susan. My name is Mary. No, so I'm talking to Mary. Yes, I am. You know, so I would check. I'm 55, and my name is Antony. So I have to do two or three check tests. I then put it to the higher greater good. So basically, it's perfectly fine for me for the greatest and higher good for the individual I'm testing, and I only ever test with permission, generally speaking. So I mean, yeah, but I actually sat next to someone on the underground tube station in London on my way back from work one day, and he was a West Indian man, so a black, dark-skinned chap. And he looked a bit heavy, but I sat down and I thought, okay. I thought, okay, well, let me just check out. So I sort of checked out, and it felt very unclean, I have to say. I'll never do it again. But I really picked up a really sluggish cardiovascular system in him, but it was just not appropriate. So that's the only time I'll do that in my life. Otherwise, it's all permission oriented. And I've probably done 3 million of these tests. I did the math the other day of how many I do per day, and just checking, and I find it really helps to center me to my gut. So it really helps to access my gut by using that. So straight by going there. And what I found is, because I've done the testing so often, I do it all day, every day sort of thing. I find that I know the answer in my gut already, and this validates it. So the more often you do the testing, the more often you get to say, you know, I knew that. I sort of, yeah, it's almost like the feeling of what it is comes before the thought and the words, and then you can validate it with this. But again, I'm always skeptical, and I do a double check. So I do a test which is a positive and then a negative, if I can. So let's say Mary needs magnesium, for example, and I'm actually just getting a no on that. And then so magnesium will be something that Mary needs. No, Mary should not take magnesium, and that's a no. So it's neither one thing nor the other. It's that you don't have to take magnesium, but you shouldn't not take it. And obviously, if it's a nutrient, that's fine. But if it's a toxin, you're going to have a yes or a no, one way or the other. Practice, 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 practice.
Mary, did you have a follow-up?
I just am intrigued by what you said about magnesium, because it's been troubling me and really bothering me for months.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, and so thank you for being open to this call, because obviously I can't see you, but I got the sense to talk about magnesium with you. But I think you need more glutathione support. When I say I think, your glutathione lack is actually directly having an impact on your magnesium receptors, I believe. And so what a study has shown, and it's something that we know as practitioners, is this redox balance that Stephen was referring to, is that if you've got too much oxidative stress, it actually has a negative impact on receptors and the ability to transport magnesium into the cell. And so you can take all the magnesium you blooming like, and you're like, I'm taking the magnesium, and you can say, I take magnesium chloride, magnesium glycinate, but I think you need to improve your glutathione. Now, what was interesting for you is that NAC is a fantastic support for glutathione, but I'm not getting that NAC would be good for you. And so you can see how complex it gets, folks. I think lipoic acid would be a very good thing for you, Mary. Alpha thioctic acid, lipoic acid, R-lipoic acid would be very good for you. but you need something else as well. I think you need lipoic acid and selenium. Selenium, I would suggest you have 200 mcg per day, and I think sodium selenite would be ideal for you. You following this, Mary? Sodium selenite, 200 mcg, micrograms per day, and I would take lipoic acid. The allergy research have an ALA release, alpha lipoic acid sustained release, because it's actually used up in the body pretty quickly. The sustained release form is often better, and I would think that probably an ALA release at each meal would be very good for you, with the selenium 100 mcg at breakfast, 100 mcg at dinner, and that will support your ability to use magnesium properly, and then you'll benefit from magnesium, and then let's see how you feel, as it were. Obviously, I don't know anything about you, but yeah.
And what happened to the glutathione in all this?
Well, the alpha lipoic acid and selenium support glutathione levels.
I see.
So selenium there are two types of glutathione, one of which is dependent on glutathione, and so selenium supports glutathione, lipoic acid supports glutathione too. What's interesting, and it is interesting, and it's literally, as you see, I'm speaking fast because I feel it, and I can't ever speak as quickly as I get the information sometimes. I'm just not getting the NAC as an appropriate thing for you to help your glutathione in your particular instance. Lipoic acid supports glutathione, as does selenium.
So redox balance
Yeah.
is about the ability to take oxidized glutathione and convert it back into reduced glutathione, which would then function as an antioxidant.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're so smart.
Charlotte, do you have a question?
No, I was trying to find the hand raising on my file, and I can't find it this time.
Is your participants window open?
Is that the one where the mute button is?
No, it's in the center bottom of your screen next to the chat window. There's a participants window. And if you pop that up on your screen, you should see the hand. So if you have a question, now would be the best time.
No.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, I've got two more questions that have stacked up at the last minute, and we'll say they're the last ones for the session. And they have to do with chronic fatigue and the ordering of your health manual. So the first thing is, how can somebody get access to your health manuals?
Okay, so the website is called hayneshealthmanuals.com. It may be a bold thing, but and it's the beginning of the manual. So the first course, which is basically it's a course manual, so it's not actually a thing, it's actually a video course, and I'm going to be basically doing the same. I plan, and things may change, I plan to run the same approach. So it's going to be a video course. So effectively, I've taught most of these subjects, and I'm basically going to condense them into sort of 6 to 12 videos, but 6 different modules with 1 or 2 videos each to present the information on the course. So effectively, it's condensing it and making it accessible to the interested layperson as well as the practitioner, because the depth of information will be good. It'll be a good depth. And then I'm going to build up from there. So if I wasn't doing any other work, and of course I got my work cut out because I've got lots and lots of work on, but when I get to it, I will be then increasing the list. So I've got subclinical hypothyroidism, probably going to do Hashimoto's next. Then I want to do autoimmune and MS, and then we'll branch out from there. And then I'll expand the manuals. And so I've got potentially a never-ending list that I'll be getting to, but I want to create that video learning process rather than just purely the written word.
And about chronic fatigue syndrome and your way of treating it and any products that you favor.
Yes, I've been, again, blessed to have the education from Professor Marty Paul from Washington University, who's actually got physics and chemistry degrees. And he introduced the no cycle theory. And so I've addressed that with antioxidants, and I've had a conversation with him, and he formulated antioxidants for allergy research to make, and there are definitely a few in there. So I would look to address that. Obviously, taking all the factors we talked about today with autoimmunity. Obviously, if there's a gut issue, there's food reactivity, and there's poor sleep, etc., there's sleep hygiene. But in terms of specific mechanisms for CFS, I have found that there are a few supplements which have come up time and time again. They've tested very well for the majority of individuals with chronic fatigue with a no imbalance. And I will name them now. There is a very potent brown algae antioxidant that's also called CNELM, S-E-A-N-O-L. It's also referred to as Eclonia cava extract. It's believed to have about 10 times the efficacy of antioxidant status as green tea extract. So it's quite a potent antioxidant. And the supplement name from allergy research is Fibro Boost. And it seems that it's water soluble and fat soluble, and therefore helps to address the oxidative stress in both the water and fat soluble environments in the body. And so I've used Fibro Boost, and it's 2 capsules, 30 minutes before breakfast and 30 minutes before lunch. And it's the same dosing with everyone I've met, which is interesting because I don't recommend it to everyone with chronic tea, but it tests up. So Fibro Boost contains a Cloniacava extract, very interesting antioxidant history. It took a Korean PhD on sabbatical at Washington University for Stephen Levine PhD from allergy research to get a hold and sort of see the information. And then we got hold of it, and I used it, and I introduced that to Marty Paul, who was intrigued to know how well it worked. The other supplement that Marty Paul put together for allergy research that I found to be very effective almost across the board is something called CoQ Gamma E. Obviously it's CoQ10, and it's the gamma tocopherol form of vitamin E, and it's got the fat soluble antioxidants as well as the fat soluble vitamin C in there and fat soluble vitamin A. So CoQ Gamma E by allergy research. And the third supplement, again put together by Professor Marty Paul as part of his protocol for the no cycle, is something called NAC enhanced antioxidant formula. Bit of a mouthful. NAC enhanced antioxidant formula, allergy research. And that contains NAC, charmethylglycine, and I think vitamin B2, and possibly one other. So it's more than just the NAC support for glutathione. So Fibro Boost, CoQ Gamma E, and NAC Enhanced are the 3 supplements I've used most commonly for the antioxidant support to help to interrupt the positive feed forward cycle of the no.
Thank you very much for being our guest again.
Oh, wow. A pleasure.
Susan?
And thank you, Stephen. There's so much I can learn from you, just from hearing the way you phrase the questions as well. And thank you, Susan, for having me. I mean, it's really, I love it. There's no doubt, love it. Well, if you'll have me, I'll definitely come on regularly.
Well, we had like 6 votes for you to come back again.
6, this is great, right? 6.
That's more than 10%.
Wow. Okay, fantastic.
Well, I vote for him.
Yeah.
Great. You know, and it's yeah. So you know, if we spread the word, and again, we can learn from, again, whether we could all learn all the stuff we need from everyone, but we can't. So it's obviously a platform to share information. But yeah, I've had the blessing of really not being quite sure about what a specialty should be for me. So actually, as a result, I've actually covered lots of ground.
Been a generalist. So, yeah.
Yeah, super generalist. Well, dare I say, aiming to be a super generalist. Yeah.
We've got 4 more votes for you.
Okay. Fab.
So now we're
Thanks, folks. Listen, and of course, I have no idea where we all are in the world, but yeah, great.
Okay,
so
well, it's now probably past your bedtime, so thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Sleep
great.
well.
Stephen, thanks so much, and thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Susan, too. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And everybody save your chat if you want it.
Yeah, save the chat. Yeah.
There's good stuff in the chat.
I'm leaving. Bye, everyone.
Okay. I'll shut down last. So.
Okay, yeah. I'm leaving. Bye, everyone.
Okay. As long as I stay on, you can save the chat. Wes, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I did have a question, but and he might have mentioned something about it, but you know, he speaks very quickly, and I think I probably missed it. With regard to Epstein-Barr virus, did he mention anything that might be helpful in dealing with it?
I suspect that he did, but I don't remember specifically whether he. I know he mentioned it several times as being one of the critical viruses associated with various autoimmune conditions.
I guess I'll just rerun the presentation when it's posted on the Silicon Valley Health Institute website.
And that's nice because anytime he speaks too fast, you can pause, back up, and run through it again.
That's exactly it. And I would post my picture if I could, or my face if I could figure out how to turn on the camera again, but we'll do it
well,
next.
practice and see if you can get it to work. Make sure that some other program isn't
Okay,
using.
there you go.
There you go. Yeah, so sometimes some other program might have your camera under lock and key.
Thank you again, Steve.
Okay, take care. Good to see everybody. Good night.